कैमरा भी ऑन कर स्टार्ट कर।
Once again, I, Dr. Shagufta Khan, on behalf of the Institute of Pharmaceutical Education and Research, Varna, welcome you all to the second session of the first day of AICT-sponsored short-term training program on outcome-based pedagogical methods for effective teaching, learning, and accreditation. Dear participants, we are pleased to have with us a very special guest and an amazing speaker, Dr. Prantik Banerjee. And with privilege, I take this opportunity to introduce our esteemed speaker to you all. Dr. Prantik Banerjee is Associate Professor, Department of English and former IQAC Coordinator, Hislop College, Nagpur. He has successfully guided his college in getting A grade from NAC, Bangalore, and heritage status from UGC, New Delhi. His areas of interest are cultural studies, film theory, medical humanities, post-colonial studies, trauma theory, gerontology, and disability studies. He is also interested in higher education policies, quality assurance frameworks, and curriculum designing. He has been a keynote speaker and resource person at several international and national conferences. He has delivered the annual endowment lectures in Loyola College Chennai, Jyoti Nivas College Bengaluru, and the Royal Bhutan University. He is a member Board of Studies, RTM Nagpur University, and recently he has contributed in designing the new RTMNU syllabus for BA. His drafts for MA elective course in cultural studies, trauma studies, and disability studies have been approved by the university for implementation from the current academic session. He has been appointed as external expert to Board of Studies VG Vaze Autonomous College Mumbai from the session 2020 to 21. He is a PhD supervisor and an examiner for Sant Gadge Baba Amravati University and Bharati Desan University, Tamil Nadu. And you'll be glad to know that he was invited as an expert on the drafting committee of National Higher Education Policy. He edited the Kakodkar Committee report of National Institutes of Technology. He prepared and presented the triennial conference statement of AIACHE at Christ University, Bangalore. He is a NAC expert and RUSA trainer and has conducted many training programs for colleges and universities across India. He is an external advisor to IQAC of reputed colleges and universities, and he has an empaneled as national faculty trainer for AIACHE New Delhi. He was invited as expert on the selection committee for appointment of lecturers by St. Stephen's College, New Delhi and Xavier's College, Mumbai. He is certified HRD trainer from TCS Bengaluru and has conducted several teacher and corporate training programs. He is on the editorial board of several international and national journals on higher education as well as English studies. His publications include one book, 3 anthologies, 7 book chapters, and 38 research papers in peer-reviewed journals. Dear participants, he is a published poet and short story writer. His poems were featured in Sahitya Academy's Indian Literature, Pen, Brown Critic, Kavya Bharti, Journal of Poetry Society of India, Little Magazine. He was featured as Poet of the Fortnight by Kamla Das and Sahitya Academy awardee, Indian poetess. The Indian Express Nagpur edition and the Hitwada have published his articles. So, dear participants, join me welcome an amazing personality today for the second session, Dr. Banerjee, to speak on learning outcomes and pandemic relearning, the challenge for teachers. So I would like to request Dr. Prantik Banerjee to commence with his talk.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shagufta. The most important question of this millennium, of this century, and of this year is this question: am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Right. Thank you so much for that introduction. Although I must correct you that I was not a member of the drafting committee of the National Education Policy. I was a member of the drafting committee of National Education Policy of the Church of North India, which essentially is an organization that looks into a higher education interests of Christian institutions in India. So I was not a part of the NEP 2020 drafting committee.
Okay.
So, but thank you so much. And I like that last bit where, where you talked about my literary career, about being a poet as well as a short story writer. Well, in a short-term training program such as this, it's not always that you perhaps teachers of the pharmacy discipline or the pharmacy stream are perhaps not so accustomed or not so familiar with a language teacher, addressing them. Because I believe that the English language and your core curriculum are pretty much, I wouldn't say divorced from each other, but certainly language is not your specialty, nor is it your area of expertise. Having said that, I think, the most important connection that I find, and to justify why I have been invited by the principal of the Institute of Pharmaceutical Medicine and Research, Wardha, as well as the coordinator of this particular STTP program, that is Dr. Puranik. I think, rather than justifying, I think there is a common ground that we might find ourselves in. Although our disciplines are very different, I'm a language teacher, you are mostly, I believe, teachers of pharmacy. However, there's a common ground, and that common ground is something very interesting, and that is alchemy. I think in your history, in the history of pharmaceutical medicine or medical science itself, we all go back to the ancient Greeks. And in ancient Greece, there was this concept about a philosopher who was also into medical science. And the name of such a practitioner of both speculative philosophy as well as medical science, was called by the name alchemist. And I think as teachers of pharmacy, well, you are all the modern, or shall I say, the 21st version of the ancient Greek alchemist. And the ancient Greek alchemist was basically a worker of miracles. He worked miracles. He had two defining roles. One was that his primary task was to turn base metals into gold. And therefore, it involved perhaps his expertise in chemical equations on how to turn base metals into gold. And the second one was perhaps even more defining and more important, and that was, it was a belief that alchemy, or the alchemist as a practitioner of alchemy, would find a cure for all illnesses, a panacea. A panacea, as you would know, panacea, like the word pandemic, is a cure for all illnesses. And this is what it was the belief that an alchemist was not somebody who merely had or merely learned the chemistry of turning base metals into gold, but also had this miraculous power, almost this magical power of of um, of making a cure for all illnesses. Well, dear participants, I think as teachers of pharmacy or as researchers of the discipline of pharmacy, I think, and everybody else outside the discipline, the entire country, why the entire country? In fact, the entire world is waiting with bated breath for the vaccine, for the COVID vaccine to come out. And and who better than practitioners of pharmacy in our scientific laboratories, who, as I said, are our modern day alchemists. It is only they, or it is only people who belong to your own discipline, to your own field of specialization, who are working day and night, toiling day and night in order to bring out that one vaccine which will get rid of us, or rather get rid of the COVID epidemic or pandemic that we all are struggling to cope up with. The second, the second reason perhaps that could justify my being here is that, dear participants like you, I'm a teacher. And I think one of the fundamental, one of the primary roles that a teacher plays is to turn base metal into gold. And who are these base metals? I suppose you could call our students base metals. Metals, they are precious metals, but metals that are still raw, perhaps, that still are not polished. And therefore, like an alchemist, a teacher, we all are teachers, and we all teachers are alchemists, because we have an important role in transforming or transmuting our students from base metals into gold. So if you all agree with that sentiment, then perhaps I have a few things to share with you. But before I do that, let me share my screen with you. Shagufta ma'am, is it visible to everybody?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, it is visible, but
Okay.
I think the view should be enlarged.
It is. It is maximized.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. It's full slide view.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So, well, friends, dear participants, what I'm going to talk through or take you through my talk, today's talk, is learning outcomes and pandemic relearnings, and what this pandemic relearning, the kind of challenge that it holds for teachers. Friends, I want you to look at this cluster of images on the slide, and I'm sure all of us would have been experiencing this. Literally, our institutional spaces, the spaces of teaching and learning in our colleges and universities since the time of the outbreak of COVID-19 has been emptied out. Emptied out, these same spaces, the classrooms, the laboratories, the language laboratories, our playgrounds, our auditoriums, our prosceniums, our corridors, our cafeterias, all of these, which about 7 months back were filled with the hustle and bustle of a busy, happening college, all of this has been emptied out. All of this has been silenced by the outbreak of a dangerous and self-mutating virus that we now identify as COVID-19. And it's been, therefore, a very strange experience for all of us. We who have, for many, many years, I have been a teacher for more than 25 years, and I had never imagined that we would actually face a situation where we would be having to teach without our students in front of us, that we would have to teach in an online mode, that even for a webinar or for a short-term teaching program, that we would be faces on a virtual platform without, without the physical, without the excitement, without the energy, excitement, and dynamicism of a face-to-face physical presence. So I think this is what is now being called as the new normal in our higher educational institutions. And sadly enough, we have been missing. We have been missing what we have got accustomed to. And for teachers like me who have been teaching from the last Jurassic age, our students also, I think, our students are the ones who perhaps who right now in their collegiate years, in their college years, are missing out on some of the most exciting and some of the most memorable experiences that you and I as graduates, that you and I, when we were in college, had witnessed. Well, you could say that the COVID-19 has really created an unprecedented disruption in the landscape of higher education in India. And, schools and colleges that were shut down in the second week of March as a preventive measure to contain the spread of the COVID-19. It is now November and we are still debating whether to reopen. So, the COVID-19 has indeed brought about a paradigm shift in our entire educational ecosystem. And apart from impacting the future of 32 crore young Indian students, the pandemic has also pushed educators to reshape the way we teach, the way we evaluate, the way we deliver the curriculum. Of course, we have not, as teachers, as educators, we have not sat idle while the pandemic or while the COVID-19 has taken its toll with thousands and thousands of lives being lost. And in fact, the education fraternity itself has risen to the challenge and taken some immediate measures in response to the pandemic. And these, included, for example, shifting our entire teaching process from an offline to an online. Of course, the process itself of shifting our physical teaching to a virtual teaching happened on a very untested and unprecedented scale. Then conducting online assessments, including our examinations on a trial and error basis. We also have been creating content, specifically e-content, suitable for remote learning using technology and tools that are available. But despite the variety and the ingenuity of coming up with new approaches and new strategies, teaching strategies, so that we can still continue to deliver quality education to our students, this transition of teaching learning that has taken place from face-to-face mode to an online mode has also thrown up its own share of challenges, its own share of difficulties. Remember, and I'm sure many of us would have experienced in our own teaching classes, our virtual teaching or our online teaching classes, the limited access of both students as well as teachers to the internet, the lack of uninterrupted power supply, ill-trained or even ill-equipped teachers, the absence of a robust monitoring method, and the considerable loss of a rapport between teachers and students in an online world, the kind of rapport, the kind of bond and friendship that we as teachers used to forge with our students when we were taking classes in a physical classroom in our colleges and during normal time. So all of this has created, as I said, a huge disruption in the teaching learning ecosystem of our colleges, and all the stakeholders, and that includes not just students and teachers, but our college administrators, for example, the alumni, the parents, for example, the alumni, as well as even the industry for that matter, has had to make huge shifts from a world that has suddenly gone completely awry, a world where everything now is digitized, is becoming more and more digitized. Everything is becoming more and more virtual. Friends, I think when we talk about the transformation, the COVID-19, in a sense, has had both positive, if I may say so, a few positive changes. It has brought about a few positive results and outcomes over and above the overwhelming negative effect of, as I said, loss of lives, the stress and the pressure on the medical fraternity, and the enormous, enormous challenge that every day, or what we call our COVID warriors, our doctors and nurses, for example, are trying to save human lives. So apart from all these difficulties and the challenges, the human spirit has been indomitable. The human spirit is undefeated. And perhaps one of the positive things, the few positive things that it has brought about, which I personally feel, is that it has accelerated the change from in our very education pattern, our education paradigm from 1.0, it to which was largely the traditional and the conventional. When we talk about education 1.0, I'm referring to the traditional and the conventional mode of teaching learning experience that used to take place perhaps 40, 50 years back, primarily where it is in this particular model of education 1.0, it is the teacher who is often considered as the sage on the stage. And then the primary method of curriculum delivery is what we call the chalk and talk method. And then post 1980s and for the next 3 decades, there has been a huge transformation. We have shifted from education 1.0 to education 2.0 with the arrival of computer literacy and computer technology. And education 2.0 was primarily the interface between human teaching or human learning and computer-assisted teaching or computer-assisted learning. Now, the new millennium, in fact, in the new millennium, which gave birth, which ushered in education 3.0, many of the things that we identify as the defining qualities of education 3.0 were already happening in the first 2 decades of the new millennium. However, what the COVID-19 crisis has done, as I would like to claim, as I would like to argue, is that it has fastened, it has accelerated, it has speeded up the change and the transformation from education 2.0 to education 3.0 in a fantastically unpredictable way, in the speed of transformation, the rate of transformation has been almost unimaginable. And therefore I say it is fantastical. What do we mean by education 3.0? Well, what I really mean is it's often used as an umbrella term to describe a variety of ways, primarily whose focus is to integrate technology into all the processes and activities of teaching learning. According to the education theorist Jeff Borden, education 3.0 involves, it is a confluence. He says it's a confluence of neuroscience, cognitive psychology, and education technology, of course. And these primarily are, they use web-based digital and mobile technology, including apps, including hardware and software. In other words, education 3.0, you could say, is anything with an E in front of it. Anything with an E, which begins with the prefix E in front of it, could be called education 3.0. And therefore, as teachers, for example, particularly teachers who belong to the older generation, people like me, for example, education 3.0 made us aware that, not to view digital technology as a competitor or as a rival or something that is, something that is against the current, or what we call the conventional teaching models. Education 3.0 means actively embracing, getting rid of our fears and apprehensions of technology and embracing new technologies to see how we can all help students learn more efficiently, more effectively by, as I said, by blending technology into our conventional teaching models or conventional teaching patterns. Just think about how, how post, after the, from the 3rd or the 4th week of March itself, when we went into lockdown, how quickly, as a teaching community, we embraced, we trained ourselves, we skilled ourselves into the new digital and virtual technologies. We quickly learned how to change our physical class, for example, our class notes and our chalk and talk method into delivering into delivering our lessons, into delivering our syllabus to our students without any break. And that, friends, I think is a huge, it's a huge acknowledgement, or rather, it is a huge endorsement for how the student, how the teachers, how we all teachers as a community have risen to the challenge, and how quickly we have trained and equipped ourselves to deliver the best and the most effective kind of teaching on the virtual platforms or in an online method. So this shift, I'm saying, this shift from education 2.0 to 3.0 has been primarily, triggered by the COVID-19 crisis. Had the COVID-19 crisis not taken place, well, the transformation would still have happened, but perhaps not at this speed, not at this rapid pace as it has happened. So it has forced us, for example, to find challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced us to find solutions to the challenges of teaching learning. And I see, I'll outline four major shifts that will affect, that will impact, that are already impacting our education ecosystem. The first that I mentioned is the increasing use of technology. That is, we've seen, we already, as I was saying, we all are using online teaching methods, technological tools, developing e-content, quickly turning our classroom lectures into PPTs, and also sharing, our websites and links hyperlinks to all these e-resources. But well, we've the government too has been, using the electronic media prolifically to ensure learning continuity for our students. Some state governments have even been working with media partners. We know that, such as Doordarshan and All India Radio, to broadcast, virtual classes and transmit educational content through their regional challenges. Sorry, through their regional channels. Excuse me. Uh, so this is not only helping students, in rural areas, particularly where there is no internet connection, but also think about the visually impaired learners, or the physically challenged, or the differently abled, what we call, excuse me, the differently abled learners. Um, out, all the stakeholders involved in the processes of higher education have been involved. The government and the state governments have been involved. Higher education policymakers have been involved. Uh, Principals and vice chancellors have been involved, and we, at our own level as teachers, we too have been uh, uh, both contributing as well as cooperating with this mammoth exercise, with this challenging exercise of giving quality education, uninterrupted education to our students. Um, well, the second change that I see is the increasing use of online tools and technology to enhance the learning experience for our students. I mean, I'm sure you must have visited, or you must have uh, also asked your students to visit the free online uh, digital repositories on the UGC site, like SWAM, for example, ePathshala or Diksha, which basically provides us um, content-rich, content-rich material in a digitized form. So and what we have also, relearned in the process of teaching in a new environment, in a new digital and virtual environment, is that I think more and more as teachers, we have moved away from, as I said, from the sage on the stage to the guide by the side, which was in a physical classroom, to towards blended learning, what we call blended learning. And as the word suggests, this particular methodology of teaching is a blend of traditional chalk room method with technology. And so what has happened, therefore, is, as teachers, perhaps even you might have done this, that you might have recorded your lectures of a particular unit and then posted them, uploaded them, so that students before they come to our virtual classrooms would have already heard perhaps the core principles, or the salient points of that particular curriculum unit. But uh, and that has allowed, this method of blended learning has allowed to turn our classroom spaces, even though they are virtual, even though they are online, into a forum for discussion, for problem solving, for doubt clearing. And that way, both as teachers and students, we have been able to go deeper into the discipline, and in the process promoted collaborative and experiential learning. This picture on your slide that it appears, is in fact what epitomizes, what symbolizes. You could call it an advertisement, the best advertisement for education, what we have been calling education 2.0. And that is, I mean, if you Google um, the name of Shugato Mitro, or even The School in the Cloud, this is a documentary. This is a documentary made, I think, in the early 2000s. But the man appearing on the left of the slide is a TED Talk speaker, as well as an educationist, as well as a computer software engineer named Shugato Mitra. And he was the one who, in way back in the 1990s, conducted, a very small experiment, and that was in his office building, in where he was working in Delhi, and in his office building he made a hole. He made a hole on the wall where he installed a computer, a desktop computer, with a mouse. And what happened, therefore, as the documentary also will show you, is that this computer in the hole in the wall drew the attention. It attracted small children from the local slums, from the bastis, from the nearby bastis. And what they started doing, that, of course, it was all on camera. It was being recorded on camera, unknown to the children. But the children got so attracted to the computer in the hole in the wall that they started that they would every day they would come, take turns, and they would operate the system. Now remember, these children often were illiterate children who did not even go to school. And yet, within a few weeks, Shugata Mitra found that these children, without any training, without anybody telling them how to operate a computer, were not only learning, but they were, they were asked. I mean, they were taking notes, they were visiting sites, and that is the transformative power, or the transformational power of technology. Shugato Mitra's TED Talk is called The School in the Cloud. Do watch this TED Talk on YouTube. And for those of us who are still not convinced that technology will be the game changer in the future of higher education, well, you need to actually watch it and be a believer. The third change that I'll come quickly is education 3.0 has brought in, is the personalization and customization of learning for the individual learner. And I'll explain to it. I probably will go back to this point a little later. And the fourth, I think, which is a major challenge, one of the big challenges that the COVID crisis has brought into the educational field in our teaching learning process, is to make this very learning that we are doing on a virtual platform through online method equitable and accessible. In the month of July, when schools had reopened, and when I say schools had reopened, meaning online teaching had begun in schools, there was a survey done in the city of Nagpur, or I think in the district of Nagpur, in order to find out what percentage of school-going children had laptops, had smartphones, or were even or had internet connections. The result was quite an eye-opener, and it showed that barely 27% of school-going children in different age groups and in different classrooms had internet connectivity, or had mobiles, smartphones and computers at home. Now this clearly is brings out the challenge, or the challenge that COVID-19 has brought about with online teaching, and that is online teaching may be fine for many of us, but is it accessible? Is it equitable? When a sizable and a large number of population, not just in the city, but particularly in the rural areas, do not have access to internet connection, and even when they do, there are issues of broadband and there are issues of connectivity. So, however, as I said, there are two ways of looking at a glass half filled with water. You could say it's half full, it is only half, or you could say it's half empty, or you could say it is half full. And one of the positive things, once again, that online teaching has delivered because of COVID-19 is that many people, including you and I'm sure as teachers, irrespective of our age and our experience, you would have yourself enrolled in a whole range of new courses that were made available by some of the top universities in the world, and for free. So a lot of universities top universities opened up their courses, opened up their programs, and uh, allowed teachers and learners and students and research scholars access to their libraries, access to their digital resources, access to, think about, I'm sure this probably is not the only webinar or sorry, the short-term training program that you're doing. I'm sure many of you would have attended webinars where, because of the shift onto online platforms and the organizing of webinars, we have had a whole range. We could listen to international speakers, renowned scientists, acclaimed academicians on a virtual platform, which perhaps we did not think of doing it before the COVID crisis happened. So, as I was saying, that the COVID-19 has actually brought about a speedy shift, a speedy transformation of education 2.0 to education 3.0. Well, what one of the things I have been giving talks on webinars and also online workshops. And again, in a scenario like this, through a virtual platform, at the best of times, no matter how many times I have delivered a talk or conducted a workshop, the one thing that is missing, which you must have also experienced in your classroom, is this, direct eye-to-eye contact with the participants, whether it is teacher as participants or whether it is student as participants. And it takes away the naturalness, the spontaneity, as well as the excitement. Remember the time when you had, when you walked into a class and you started delivering your lecture, or you started conducting a practical. And remember the time when when a student raised his or her hand and asked a question. Now that wasn't really an interruption. It actually moved the teaching learning experience into another zone, into another level. And that is what I always find it, no matter how many times I've delivered talks on different forums, um, the fact that I see on my screen, a gallery where all the participants have been muted and their cameras off, is something that is, even now after so many months, it is quite unnerving. It is quite discomforting. All right. But anyway, I think we all need to make adjustments. And therefore, when the COVID-19 crisis happened around the same time, where the National Education Policy 2020, all right, I think I spoke too soon, because some background noise has to be cut out. Please mute. Participants are requested to, or maybe somebody in the, yeah, thank you. All right. So the occurrence of the pandemic and the formal announcement of the National Education Policy 2020 coincidentally, took place around the same time. And I think, the NEP 2020, I'm sure many of you would have gone through this document. It basically offers, it's a futuristic, it's a very visionary document that looks into the challenges in the future in the field of higher education. And it also offers a vision for overhauling, for revamping, and for re-energizing what you and I do at a very micro level. So we all know that the National Education Policy has actually listed 10 major problems, major challenges, call it problems or call it challenges. And because if you call it problems or challenges, I think challenges is a better word than problems. But it also offers, it has offered 9 solutions. So what are these challenges and 9 solutions? Quickly, we have For example, it talks about the educational ecosystem being, which is a fragmentary one, and therefore it calls for the new education policy calls for establishment of large multidisciplinary universities. Uh, they also identify that one of the flaws or one of the defects of our education system is basically that there is complete divorce, there is a complete lack of confluence between professional courses and what used to, or for example, the arts and the humanities. So all our knowledge systems in the old system or the conventional system are being transacted in little silos of knowledge delivery and knowledge gaining. So what the NEP 2020 tries to attempt is to shift from what I call from the conventional STEM formula, that is science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM, to STEAM, STEAM, that is along with science, technology, education, engineering. Well, there is a place now for arts. And if you've read the document, I think one of the major shifts in what the policy envisions about the future of higher education is that there will be what it calls the teaching and learning of liberal arts, not arts, but liberal arts. But well, since my talk is not on NEP 2020, I will, I just wanted to highlight this point and I'll quickly move on. But why I brought this NEP 2020 into my talk is to once again, is to suggest that there were two catalysts for this transformation from education 2.0 to education 3.0. One that was planned, one that was deliberated, one that has, and by that I mean the NEP 2020, the drafting committee has been at work in bringing out this policy document for almost a year and a half. So this was already planned and it was in the offing. But what was unplanned, what was unpredicted was, of course, the COVID-19, the pandemic outbreak. But the two of them, the NEP 2020 as well as the COVID-19, has played its own role in instrumenting or in implementing or in accelerating the implementation of major changes in our teaching learning ecosystem. While I take a water break, dear participants, take a look at the slide. In a normal, well, we these days call our own situation as the new normal. But in the old normal, as we would say, in the old normal, when I would do a workshop on outcome-based education, and I've done it in several engineering and management colleges, I would pause and ask the participants randomly, and I would ask them, can you name three attributes, that is three qualities that you feel your graduates have acquired after finishing their course, after finishing their graduation program? Can you name three qualities, three distinctive qualities that you think are, for example, which are special to, let us say, to your college, to your institution? Friends, when we talk about learning outcomes, or when we are talking about how we are going about this challenge of delivering quality education, of continuing to serve our student community and making them employment ready, I think graduate attributes play a very crucial role. The identification and the description and the circulation or the publication of graduate attributes is an important activity of all educational institutions. Uh, we do know that all our accrediting agencies, our academic audit agencies like NAC, for example, or NBA, or for that matter, even AICT, all of these emphasize that every single education system must spell out, it must spell out its own graduate attributes. But then when we say graduate attributes are not always unique and discrete and specific to certain institutions, these are what we call 21st century competencies. These are almost must-haves for every graduate student, no matter what his discipline or what his stream is. So I just wanted to share with you that that when we talk about 21st century competencies, in our education system we talk about the 6 C's. You know, are we do our the kind of teaching that we are doing, whether in an previous offline method and now on an online method, does it inculcate the habit of the attribute of critical reasoning among our students? Are our pharmacy students, your pharmacy students, for example, even though they are in a specialized, are they able to communicate clearly? And that is so important for a pharmacy graduate, because after all, you are going to cater to to um, to to people who are sick, who are ill, and that requires human and humane qualities. And the way in which a pharmacy graduate, for example, establishes the ability of a pharmacy graduate to establish a rapport, a bond with patients, for example, clearly demand that such a person must not only must have knowledge and skills in pharmacy, but he must also be an excellent communicator, because that is how you develop a relationship of both empathy and sympathy with your patients. Collaborative work, the third C is collaborative work, and then culture embrace the ability to be multicultural. We all are now, your own pharmacy students, and we as teachers, we are accustomed to to work, to see our workplace, to operate in a workplace which is becoming more and more multicultural. The sheer diversity of people in India, different religions, different customs, different traditions, all of this that comes together within a community of workers, whether it is in an organization, whether it is a corporate organization, or whether it is a teaching institution, we all need some special skills to embrace multiculturalism. Then, of course, creativity. Yes, like I said, can we develop the curiosity among our own? Can you develop curiosity among your pharmacy students so that they can be the alchemists of the 21st century? Create something, create that magic, create a miracle formula which will, expedite, which will contribute to the bringing out of a vaccine for COVID. Then, of course, digital literacy, or what we call information literacy, is again something very important. So these, friends, are what I think every institution, higher education institution, must spell out. And when I say spell out, it requires designing. It is, spelling out, outlining, and identifying and publicizing the graduate attributes is something that is mandated by all academic audit, external academic audit agencies like NAC and NBA. And in most colleges, in fact, now, educators are advised to put it up on their notice board, to disseminate what the graduate attributes are, even on their homepage or their websites. Well, we when the shift from Education 2.0 to Education 3.0, one of the most important signposts or one of the most important markers of this transformation from 2.0 to 3.0 has been a shift from what used to be called the input-based education. The conventional form pattern of education was more input-driven. By that I mean our infrastructure, our finances, our resources, our laboratories, our smart classrooms, for example. All of these were they designate an input or a process-driven classroom teaching or education system. Now, when the shift in outcome-based education, what we call OBE in short, has been, the focus has shifted from input-driven process to output achieved process, which means, and OBE, this OBE model started with engineering colleges in India. In fact, it goes back, to India, to I think the AICT signing what is called the Washington Accord in 2014. Now, the Washington Accord was basically, a kind of an accrediting agency, a multilateral international accrediting agency, which allowed all the participating participating countries, those who signed the accord, to have mutual, to allow mutual transfer of not just credits, but allow the movement, the vertical movement and transnational movement of students from one signatory country to another signatory country. Now this started, so OBE came into India as the model followed by technical colleges, primarily engineering colleges. But now, in the last 20 years, it has become the default mode. It has become a default option. In fact, OBE is all our educational systems now is driven by the principles and characteristics of the OBE method, which I shall outline quickly in a few minutes. Why is OBE considered to be a game changer in the field of higher education? Well, primarily because, as I said, it is not input driven. Its focus is not on infrastructure, physical resources. Well, these are important. It doesn't disqualify the importance of these inputs, but it suggests that, OBE is a system where a measurement of learning outcomes of students is more important than input-driven processes. If you ask me what is a simple way of defining OBE, well, it is to shift the entire teaching learning process of our teaching learning activity from teaching to learning, from skills to thinking, from content to process, and from teacher instruction to student demonstration. So as you can see, one of the biggest changes, one of the significant differences between the Education 2.0 model and the 3.0 model is that under the OBE pattern, it is a very student-centered activity. Its entire learning philosophy puts the student at the center of all our curriculum design, delivery, and assessment. Because in the OBE system, student learning outcomes are not only spelled out, are not only pre-planned and spelled out in the beginning of a course, in the beginning of a session, in the beginning of a program, but these student learning outcomes, because they are learning outcomes, they are also empirically measured, which means standards, matrices, standards, rubrics, and matrices are very important because they quantify, not qualify, but quantify. They quantify to what level and to what degree your students have learned as a result of your delivery of a course, or your delivery of a module, your delivery of a unit. OBE, therefore, is commonly referred to, it's called a designing back curriculum. Designing back, because it starts first with the identification of learning outcomes. Learning outcomes are first, are, as I said, are described. And what are learning outcomes? Learning outcomes are simply what students are capable of doing upon completion of a course or a program. So in a sense, OBE addresses the following key questions. In order to design your learning outcomes, as teachers, what do we want the students to learn? If you're teaching a course, a program, then what do we want the students to learn? Second, how can we best help students to achieve it? Third, how will we know whether the students have achieved it? In other words, like I said, it has to be measurable. We should be able to measure and quantify in terms of a set of parameters. How do we close the process of curriculum delivery and make it one of continuous quality improvement? We talk about continuous evaluation. Well, under OBE, goals and objectives and learning outcomes are pre-established, but it also allows for continuous and gradual improvement in the process itself. So while we are delivering our syllabus, while we have, while we are teaching our syllabus of a course, of a particular course, of a particular program, we are also continuously, improving, plugging the gaps, aligning what we are teaching to the learning outcomes, etc. All right, I think, this is self-explanatory. The OBE model basically operates on three premises. These are the assumptions that, that unlike the traditional pattern of education, which depends on rote learning, which is CGPA driven, which measures students' achievement or learning outcome in terms of percentage. I'm sure you must have followed the news this year in the month of July when colleges were advertising, their admission process. I was shocked, or rather, well, I don't think it was a shock, but it didn't surprise me that Lady Shri Ram College of Commerce in New Delhi, guess what was the cutoff? What was the cutoff for first year students wanting to take admission in Lady Shri Ram College of Commerce? 100%. The cutoff was 100%. Now, this kind of a competitive or cutthroat, education pattern, which I call the pre-OB or the traditional, educational model with its emphasis on exams and rote learning, is something that the OBE strives or attempts to replace. Instead of competition, OBE fosters collaboration. And therefore, it believes that there are, it believes in putting in place all those systems, processes, and activities which would help all students to achieve a degree of success. And if there are any mistakes, if there are mistakes or learning gaps in a student's learning process, then it is not the fault of the students. So colleges, therefore, under the OB philosophy, colleges and universities are supposed to put in place those very conditions which are conducive to ensure that learning outcomes of a course or a program or a syllabus are perfectly achieved for the students. So OBE basically involves three components. It involves out-based curriculum, outcome-based learning, and outcome-based assessment and evaluation. This is all that I have said is on this slide. It gives you a framework for outcome-based education. And what you see on the slide is that look at everything that we define, everything that takes place in our college environment or our institute's environment is correlated in the OBE model. For example, the institution's vision and mission is linked to the graduate attributes that I mentioned in the beginning of my talk. And these graduate attributes are intrinsically related to program outcomes. Program outcomes are related to course outcomes, and course outcomes are related to what you and I do in the classroom. For example, the designing of our syllabus, the delivery of that syllabus in the class, as well as our evaluation, the way in which we evaluate and assess our students. Notice on either side of this slide, you will see that there are standards and demands, and there are social and environmental contexts. In other words, in the OBE system, stakeholder feedback is equally important, which means that especially in professional courses such as engineering and pharmacy, what industry, the participation of the industry, the future, who are going to be the future employers of our job-ready students is very important. And therefore, even at the stage of curriculum design and syllabus, OBE emphasizes that we take on board teachers and educators take on board representatives from the industry. So in a pharmacy graduate course, for example, you would have invited, I'm sure you would have invited industry partners from the from the big pharmaceutical companies in order to give their inputs and make that course, industry oriented. Because it is only these industry captains, representatives, who will be able to tell us educators, us academicians, what are the gaps, in what way can we plug those gaps, what is the lacuna in the course, and what new models or units can be incorporated in our syllabus in order to make sure that our students are placed in the best of jobs, with the best of packages, with the best of salary packages. I think I'll skip these slides. Yeah, I think I'll show you this. Why is the OBE method so very important? Well, if you look at the employer rating of skills, what the industry expects of future graduates, of, let's say, pharmaceutical graduates, well, notice that in the OBE system, and what also the industry wants, the CGPA, the graduate credit, is not so important. It's only out of a maximum of 5, it's 3.68. On the other hand, look at the other parameters, what you could call even graduate attributes. For example, communication skills. Most of the industry, the skill that the industry gives an outstanding weightage is communication, both oral communication as well as written. And that goes right at the top, 4.69. And then you could say, team skills and leadership skills and interpersonal skills. Because remember, and so, what this table demonstrates is that while our curriculum delivery, while results are important, there is a minimum standard that all pharmacy graduates need to have. But at the same time, when they graduate, when they move out of the campuses and join the corporate world, well, it is in this workplace that there are other attributes, that there are other qualities that they need to display. And industry partners will only offer jobs to our students only if, along with course specialization, they have a set of core competencies. And these core competencies include communication skills, team skills, etc., etc. Therefore, this highlights the priority or the thrust that the outcome-based education places on spelling out learning outcomes. And therefore, in a couple of minutes back in an earlier slide, I asked you, as teachers of pharmacy, what would you want your graduate students, what 3 attributes at least you would want your graduating students to have? Learning objectives under the OBE makes a distinction between learning objectives and learning outcomes. Often learning objectives and learning outcomes are used interchangeably, but they are actually different. What is a learning objective and what is a learning outcome? This distinction, it's very important that we make this distinction. Let me give you a simple example. Let me say, what is the learning objective of my session, of today's STTP virtual session 2?
एक ऍडमिशन पाहा लागेल ना, ते पैसे वापस करायचे आधी.
Probably you will say, probably not you, but probably I'll say that the learning objective of this STTP virtual session 2 is to make participants know different types of learning outcomes, or to know about the OBE model of education. What is the learning outcome? Is the learning outcome the same? No. I would say that the learning outcome is that the learner of the STTP virtual session 2 should be able to write at least three learning outcomes of the course that he or she teaches. Notice the difference here. Learning objectives are intended. They are predetermined, whereas learning outcomes are achieved results. Learning objectives are teacher-centric. What will I, as the resource person, what is my objective? What is my goal in conducting today's session? So learning objective is teacher-centric, whereas learning outcome is student-centric. Learning objectives are general, broad, and therefore not easily measurable. On the other hand, learning outcomes are specific, they are observable, and they are measurable. And therefore I said that student learning outcomes are those that are not only descriptive in nature, but they must be measurable. Okay. I'll give you a second example on this slide for it, that if you had a seminar or if you had a virtual seminar where the learning objective was, this seminar will outline new health and safety protocols. Well, that is an objective. That is what the teacher or what the resource person intends to do in the session. But what is a learning outcome? According to the OBE paradigm, a learning outcome is this one at the bottom of your slide. Seminar participants can correctly identify and follow the steps laid down by the new health and safety protocols. If you have noticed that the key difference between learning objectives and learning outcomes is pointed out by the use of verbs. Learning objectives, in their statements, in the statement of learning objectives, we have used predominantly verbs such as know, understand, introduce, etc. On the other hand, the verbs that we have used in describing our learning outcomes are verbs like apply, use, create, synthesize, prioritize, apply. These verbs are all actionable verbs. Actionable verbs. Verbs which ask the student to do something as something that by which their learning outcome can be measured. They can demonstrate what they have learned from the unit that you have taught, and at the same time, what they demonstrate should also be measured, should be quantified. So learning outcome therefore addresses two important aspects. What should your learner do as a result of instruction? It should be, as I said, something that the learner should be able to show. So the word in drafting or in writing down your learning outcomes, you must use action verbs. And at what level should your learner think as a result of your instruction? What level? Not all learners in a classroom situation have the same level of competency. And some learners learn more by using their visual, by the visual mode. Some learners learn more from their auditory mode. Some learners use multiple sensory experiences. So different learners have different levels and different methods of absorbing instructions that you as teacher are giving in a classroom, whether it is a physical classroom or a virtual classroom. How do you ensure that learning outcomes are specific? Well, we go back to, Benjamin Bloom, and Benjamin Bloom in the 60s, devised a taxonomy of educational objectives. It was basically a system of classifying, learning objectives of students or learners according to the required skill levels. So there were three broad categories. Bloom classified all learning objectives into three broad categories. First, cognitive. A cognitive level of learning invites, it assesses the thinking and problem-solving skills of the student or the learner. Then affective, which means attitudes. What are the attitudes and the value systems that happens, that is required in a teaching experience or a learning experience? And then psychomotor. So cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. These are the three broad domains that Benjamin Bloom classified in his what we call the Bloom's taxonomy. What you have on the screen is basically a revised taxonomy. Bloom's classification table was further improved. And you can see, for example, that what we do in our classroom situation. Let us say you are teaching one particular unit in tomorrow's class. What will be the learning outcome? What will be the learning outcome? How will you plan the learning outcome will depend upon what you want your students to achieve at the end of let us say, a 1-hour class. And how do you do that? By going to Bloom's taxonomy, which can give you a roadmap, which can provide a guide. For example, do you want your students to simply remember what you have taught? Then the learning outcome for the student, if written in a sentence, will use any one of these verbs that you see on the extreme right. It would be to define, to list, or to memorize. In fact, most of the conventional education model, including model number Education 2.0, are ones which are a test of the memory of our students. On the other hand, if you are a creative teacher and if you follow the OBE method, then you can devise even one single class lecture by first telling and stating to your students that that the outcome, the learning outcome for you students at the end of my class should be: can you create a new product? Can you create or design a new product? And so how will you, in letting the student know that my class on the 24th of November, the unit that I'm going to teach, in letting the student know what the learning outcome should be at the end of your 1-hour class, you will be spelling out a sentence. You would be making out a sentence in which you will be using any one of the action verbs. Either assemble. Can you assemble? Can you construct? Or rather, not can you. What I have taught will enable you to assemble or construct or create or design or develop or formulate. If a student is able to do any one of what the action verb demands, then that is quality learning. That serves the purpose of OBE, which means that it calls for curriculum, what we call curriculum mapping. Curriculum mapping. How, just as what I just told you in very simple terms, what you could do in a single lecture, deciding beforehand what the unit is going to be, and then writing down what the learning outcome will be for the student at the end of the class. Well, we can expand and amplify it. We can map the entire course on 3 parameters. The level of the skill that we want our students to learn, not just knowledge, but the skill. It could be anyone. The skill means it could be analytical skills, evaluatory skills, or creativity or innovative skills. Second, the level, the degree of competency that we want. And finally, that the skill, the level and the degree of that skill must be something that is measurable, that is observable, and that is measurable. The student should be able to demonstrate, show us teachers what they are capable of doing after the learning procedure is completed. All right. So, friends, on your slide, on your screen rather, I have taken examples of different learning outcome statements. In curriculum mapping, in OBE, remember, every single teacher, every single course facilitator, course teacher has to prepare a set of learning outcomes. And if your learning outcomes read like this, then these are poor learning, these are poor statements. Excuse me. These are poor statements. These are poor statements because notice the verbs, the words in italics and bold. Understand, know, appreciate, learn. The use of these verbs make the statements vague, general, and non-quantifiable. They cannot be measured. So when you are designing and stating a learning outcome, how do you make a better and improved learning outcome? How do you write better statements? No need to read the entire sentence, but notice the words that I've put in bold and italics. Identify and apply, use and engage, interpret, use and create, operate and clean. These are learning statements from different, from different courses, some technical, some, traditional. But notice the one common thing that makes these statements better learning outcome statements than the previous ones is that they all are actionable verbs. Because in each of these statements, they demand that the learning that the student has done the student should be able to demonstrate, should be able to show. So to wrap up, as I come to the end of my talk today, how do we as teachers write down, spell out learning outcomes? Well, these are some tips. One, as I've already repeated, begin each learning outcome with an action verb. And that action verb should not be, like know or understand. It should be words that demonstrate a skill. It should be a word that shows a higher order of thinking, a higher level of thinking. In the Bloom's taxonomy, the map that I showed you, out of the 6 remembering, and the word at the bottom of the pyramid, it's actually a pyramidical scale, one that is not reflected in what I showed. But remembering and replicating knowledge is not a higher order skill, but applying, synthesizing different components and creating a product or a design is higher order thinking. So how do you therefore, as coming back to this slide, how do you write down, how do you make a statement, a good learning outcome statement for the unit that you're teaching, for the course that you're teaching, for the program that you're teaching? So avoid words like know or understand because they are not measurable. Use only one verb. As I've shown in the previous slide, the state in all the statements, there is mostly one verb that is used. Personalize the wording of the outcomes. Simple, a simple application of the learning outcome under OBE would be that tomorrow when you go and take your class, can you begin the class by saying, students, this is the topic, which we all do. This is the topic of today's class. And then you say, at the end of 45 minutes or 48 minutes or 60 minutes, you will be able to, and then choose any one of those actionable words. Apply, demonstrate, etc., etc. So what am I suggesting? Personalize the statement. Rather than saying students are expected, personalize the statement by saying you. It brings the student closer to the activity, and it encourages and motivates the student to participate in the learning experience. It helps you also to become a good quality, to become a good teacher, a better teacher with excellent instructional skills. Personalize your teaching method by using the pronoun you, because you is inclusive. Keep your sentences short. Yeah, I've seen, in many workshops when I, with management and engineering colleges, sometimes I spread this session, I break this session into two. There are two sessions. One is what I tell them, how to write learning outcomes. And the second one is what they do. So I do follow the OBE method in my own teaching workshops. So in the second session, they are mostly writing down. Teachers are writing down the learning outcomes of their courses or their modules or their units. And sometimes, in their over-enthusiasm, they write very long explanations. Please do not. Your learning outcome statements must be short, brief, because remember, these statements or these sentences that you write must be easily understood by your students. You're writing not for you and for other teachers, you're writing for your students. So keep it short, keep it brief, use only one verb, and do not elaborate. Friends, I said OBE follows curriculum mapping. And well, no learning outcome is effective unless you are able to assess it, unless you are able to measure it. And this is often called the assessment matrix. There's no time to go into the details. I often spread my sessions across 2 sessions at least, but given the constraint of time, what is an assessment matrix? To put it very simply, in the OBE model, an assessment matrix is one where you have 3 important components. The first one is called PEO, Program Education Objectives. These are, the broader outcomes, the broader learning outcomes, or the objective of the institution itself. And therefore, it is directly linked to the vision and mission of the institution, the college, or the university. Second come the program outcomes. What are program outcomes? POs for short. Well, program outcomes, for example, a B.Pharm. B.Pharm is a program outcome. B.Tech is a program outcome. B.A. is a program outcome. So what are the learning outcomes? That has to be spelled out. And if you go in detail to the NBA, then the NBA actually asks you to give a matrix of a minimum of 11. The faculty and the heads of the departments who run a particular course have to put their gray matter together in order to give an entire rubric where there is not one, but 11 program outcomes. And all of these aiming to help the student achieve a particular skill, not just knowledge, but a particular skill. And finally, course outcomes. Course outcomes within BPharm, you would have, several papers. So those would be your courses. So those should be limited to 2 to 5. Well, friends, I think there is only that much that can be said or that can be told in a 90-minute session. But I shall end with perhaps the most important slide that you all are waiting for, and I shall quickly, as I said, I normally spread it across 2 sessions. I want you to look closely at this image, because it reconnects with what I had said in the very beginning, and that is the alchemist. The figure that you see on the slide is that of the medieval alchemist. The alchemist, the physician, the chemist, as well as the philosopher. The alchemist was a combination of 3 things. So the physician, the chemist, and the philosopher all combined together in the 14th and 15th century. Dear participants, I believe that educators are alchemists, because it is in us that we have the magical ability to help and transform learning for our students. And therefore, just as pharmacists are first and foremost alchemists, pharmacy teachers are also alchemists. Why pharmacy teachers? Well, even an English teacher like me teaching in a multi-stream college like Hislop is an alchemist, because it is within us, it is in our power that we have the potential to create magic in our teaching, learning, delivery, in our curriculum delivery. So with that, talismanic figure, with this image of the alchemist, that hereafter, COVID or no COVID, each one of us is an alchemist. And who better than you, pharmacy teachers, to understand what the role of the alchemist is. And this, I said, is the most important slide that you perhaps were waiting for. Thank you so much.
The session is now open for questions. Dear participants, the session is now open for questions. Thank you very much, sir, for an enlightening presentation. On behalf of the Institute of Pharmaceutical Education and Research, I wish to express my sincere thanks and deep sense of appreciation for highlighting us about the new education policy and education models. And we are indeed grateful to you, sir, for your excellent coverage on 6 C's of education for future. The excellent explanation on outcome-based education system and revised Bloom's taxonomy, and of course, the explanation about alchemist. So indeed, it was a pleasure to be with you today, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I also thank all the participants for being with us today.
All the best to the participants from my side.
So we are ending the meeting, sir. No?
Thank you. Thank you once again. Thank you, Dr. Puranik. And my thanks also goes to the principal and the management of the college. Thank you, madam. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Dear participants,
कंप्यूटर का आवाज बंद करा.
Yes, sir.
tomorrow's session, first session will start at 11 a.m. as usual. So you can join the first session by 10:50 a.m. Uh, the feedback link and quiz link is already posted in the chat box. So you need to fill the feedback form and quiz, solve the quiz in same link, and that will be considered as attendance for the session. The link will be open till 5 p.m. today. Thank you. Thank you everyone. आपका लैपटॉप का आवाज है ना?